Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. It is Monday, December 27th, 2021. And we hope you all had a great Christmas. This is episode 68.2. It's our Indie Spotlight. And as usual, we are looking at indies from 5 years ago, which this year is 2016. Tonight is the film Other People from director Chris Kelly. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm here at my home in Los Angeles, where I've been for the holidays, etc. I've got a couple of co-hosts to discuss Other People with me this evening. First, ladies and gentlemen, an out-of-work TV writer who doesn't seem to fit in his hometown anymore, Patrick Taylor is here.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for coming along to discuss this movie with us. Also with us, ladies and gentlemen, is his father who struggles to deal with his son's sexuality. Jim Carroll is here.
Why don't you love me, Dad?
I do love you, son.
Oh my gosh, such a breakthrough here. This is already a minute into the episode and we're having breakthroughs. This is outstanding stuff. Before we get too teary, here is the schedule for this, our 68th series of episodes. It started on Thursday, December 23rd with a review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Tonight, of course, is the Indie Spotlight. And this upcoming Thursday, December 30th, is our classic movie discussion of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And of course, next Monday, January 3rd, Jim will be back with us for our 50-second sound-off. Number of things coming up for you that night. We're going to play the movie game. Matt Polis is going to do a movie for our second run segment. And I'm going to count down the top 5 performances by SNL alums. All right, and that brings us to Who's Drinking What. I've got my usual here. I think it's my second or third favorite IPA, Elysian Space Dust IPA. Elysian, based on Elysian Park here in Los Angeles. So I've got that. Who's drinking with me is the next question. Patrick, what do you got there, Tiger?
I got something from the fridge. This is not something that I rep, but I'm going to try it today because Alex, my wife, had it, and she likes it, so I'm going to try it.
Spindrift, it looks like.
Spindrift. Brought to you
All
by...
right. There you go. Jim is a year and a day older than I am, so he's like really old. And so he gets headaches when he has to drink. You gonna chance the headache?
Look, all I'm saying is that as far as you know, this could be bourbon.
True, but it's not. It's old man tea, so you stink. But cheers to you guys. Here is the drinking slide. These are things that you, the audience, came up with, the drinking game. You guys send in things that you drink to when we do. Anytime I say all-time contrivance, contrived, verisimilitude, or diegesis. Anytime Patrick doesn't know the name of a movie or an actor, which he hates that you do that. Now he has a cheat sheet in front of him to avoid it.
I don't have one today. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be a shit
Oh, my gosh. And Jim, even though you're the longest tenured member outside of me, the audience doesn't have one for you. You are not acknowledged on the drinking slide. Isn't that sad?
I mean, it feels like high school, actually.
Excellent. I think anytime you mention your children, that should be a thing that we drink too. Here's the trivia. What I said on the last Indie, which I believe is a review of Captain Fantastic, I said we were going to continuing our 2016 Indies, and it was another one from my top 10 list of that year. Just a couple spots below Captain Fantastic on my top 10, and features the performance that I named as the best leading male performance of 2016. And so yes, Jesse Plemons from Other People was my number one actor of 2016, and I'll explain why later. The Oscar winner that year, of course, was Casey Affleck for Manchester by the Sea. Other performances that Drunk Davy and Jay Money called out that year included Denzel Washington in Fences, Jake Gyllenhaal in Nocturnal Animals, and Colin Farrell in The Lobster, which we reviewed in episode 66.2. So that's the trivia for this particular episode. Are you guys ready for the summary? Patrick seems frozen, so he's not less ready, but I'm going to go forward with it anyway. There's a thumbs up. Other People. David is a TV writer who moves back home to Sacramento from New York City to help take care of his mother, who has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Dealing with a dying mother is intensified by reassimilating with both a hometown and a family that he feels he has moved past, both intellectually and culturally, especially after controversially coming out 9 years prior. Guys, how was that summary?
Yeah, I mean,
that's good. It was really good. I like it.
Thank you. Excellent. Patrick says that now every time because one time he criticized me on it. I made him do his own summary, so he didn't like that. So now he's back on board with my summaries, which I appreciate. The indies work a little different. On the Indie Spotlights, one of us always recommends an indie from 5 years ago and basically presents it to the group almost like a dissertation, and it's usually me. But either way, now that we're on our 7th season, we can revisit indies that came up in our various top 10 lists from 2016. And so rather than go over it now, here is a very ill me from that night on February 23rd, 2017, in which we did the top 10 films of 2016. Even though J Money is on camera, this is me speaking about my number 7 film from 2016.
My number 7 is a film that snuck up on me. This is a film called Other People. It seemed like another dramedy that dealt with terminal illness, but the characters are so rich and so real that they wonderfully become relatable and recognizable. All the artifice is sort of stripped away, and this all too common situation, both in real life and in movies, becomes fresh and personal, not just to the filmmakers, but to us as well. I often talk about emotional engagement as a barometer for movie success, and this movie achieves it in spades. Most importantly, its laughs are real and grounded. So it's not that sitcom, set them up and knock them down type thing. The conversations that you hear in the movie are the kinds you might hear in your neighbor's house. It had that much more impact as a result for me.
Yeah, I need to see it, but I did not.
I also did not, so I guess this will be a really short conversation.
It's good, trust me.
I really like how consistent I am, guys. That pretty much still sums it up for me. I'll dig into each of those things momentarily, but the next question is, have either of you heard of or seen this movie before having to watch it for tonight?
Nope.
No.
Never even heard of it. All right. So this is a first time. Who gets to go first on opening thoughts? Patrick's usually a little more brief. Patrick, opening thoughts, 1 sentence or less. How'd you feel?
A beautiful ending in a very strange package.
Okay. I don't know what that means, but that's exciting. It means we get to dig into it. Jim, try and be brief. Opening thoughts.
A gem of a film buoyed by stellar performances.
It's funny because I thought you said void, V-O-I-D, and then I heard stellar, and I'm like, okay, that's better. Buoyed by stellar performances. That makes so much more sense. So it sounds like, Jim, you're a little more on board with what I said 5 years ago.
No, very, very similar. I mean, we'll talk more about things. There were a couple of things that I wish there was more of. On the whole, I really, really enjoyed it.
So we always try to start with the most positive things. And honestly, I don't have a lot of negative. It sounds like these guys may have some things that are negative. But in rewatching it, there's not a lot of nitpicking I have to do. Maybe small stuff here and there. I'm going to start with direction, because even though the trivia called out Jesse Plemons' performance, I think that the direction is the strongest here because of the overall performances Jim mentioned earlier. Because the performances are so good across the board, head to toe, adults and even kids, I think it's worthwhile to talk about the director here. Though I named Jesse Plemons the best actor of 2016, I thought that everybody was great. We'll dig into some individual examples momentarily, but for now, I'll just say the entire ensemble feels like real, three-dimensional people across the board, which to me is a sharp contrast to something like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, Patrick, which had good leads, but the tertiary characters were more flat, whereas here, everyone was a little more well-rounded. Even the random Sacramento gay friend, his younger adopted brother, his younger sisters, the grandparents, the neighbors, the boyfriend, the improv colleagues, all the actors were given the space to recreate reality. And I think that speaks to the overall tone, which is another reason why I'm starting with the direction. In that sense, it reminds me of another cancer movie we reviewed in the show, 50-50 in episode 38.2, which also made George's top 10 films of the decade. Both films managed the extremely and underratedly tricky balance of comedy and drama, especially given how heavy the drama had the potential to be. The quite frankly brilliant opening scene right off the bat sets this tone up exquisitely with a sad moment that gets quickly undercut with a comedy of real life. And that's the other note I want to make about it in terms of the comedy itself. As I said in the clip, it's not sitcom comedy. It's not that set up punchline that we've been used to. The comedy, to me, is the kind that we experience on a day-to-day basis, which is sometimes laugh out loud funny and sometimes just charming. It's born out of real situations and real people, and as a result, was more inviting to me. I also think it's more difficult to perform and even more difficult to maintain tonally across a whole movie. At the time, I called 50-50, that movie with Seth Rogen and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I called it a masterpiece of tone, and I put this in that same category. But this might even be better in hindsight because there's something sort of stagey about the presence of Seth Rogen in that movie. Not so here. Here, everyone feels like people you come across every day. Even those that were more quirky, those quirks are grounded and not quirks for quirk's sake, at least to my mind. Jim, it's sort of in line with some of the things you were saying. What do you think about my feeling about the direction in terms of the overall performances and tone?
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading where, talking about the opening sequence, they wanted you to know right away how the story ended. They didn't want you to have false hope. That's not what this movie is about. It's not about the fight. It is about the situation.
Don't start T-word. Everyone wants to do T-word early.
Well, Don't
start T-wording on me.
It is an important directorial decision to say, let's let the audience know the ending at the beginning.
So I think it's a screenplay decision in this case, and it's still a good one. I was going to say when we got to screenplays, it's hard to separate them because they are the same person. This is very much a writer-director kind of movie, a very personal movie.
Literally what I was going to say. You can tell how personal this is.
We're simpatico so far, Jim. Patrick, does this address any of your things about the strange package, the balance of tone?
No, I get it. You know, it's melancholy with a boom boom at the end of some of the scenes.
Did you feel it was as basic as boom boom? Did you feel like it was that manipulative?
Come on, you know there was some boom boom jokes in there about death, and it just was uncomfortable at some points. But I feel like it was trying to be uncomfortable. But do I enjoy being sad for someone and also laughing with them? I don't know if I enjoyed it. However, the film got me there at the end. I felt connected with these people and I felt invested in their family. Do I like that idea of almost crying and then ha ha ha? You know, I don't know. I was uncomfortable, but it did get me there emotionally towards the end. So kudos to the director.
The roller coaster of emotions made Patrick a little queasy.
I wouldn't have picked it. And I was watching, I was like, I definitely wouldn't have picked this movie, but I stopped watching it last night, like about an hour in. And then the next day it was I was coming back to these people. I was so much more connected with the film the second time I was watching it that I had to call my mother instantly after the film was over. I was like, oh my God, this film is great. But the first day I was like, I didn't get the package, the tone.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that first tone, that first scene sets it all up. But I mean, you sort of felt awkward about it. So that's interesting, different perspective. Also interesting, though, as far as you're concerned, is the film we reviewed last year, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which you were part of, Jim wasn't, had the same approach. They told you in the beginning how it was going to end. Although in that movie, you were wondering the whole time if they lied to you because they didn't show it to you. They just told you.
Right. And I didn't see it coming. I'm the one jerk in the theater that didn't see the death coming.
Right. I remember that. It's strange that we keep reviewing these cancer movies. Like, I'm the one that recommends them. So maybe there's something about me. I don't know why I keep dragging Patrick into the cancer movies, but that's just
the tear jerkers, man. I'm calling my mom.
Every show.
What are you doing?
The weird thing is when he called his mom after watching Ready or Not after episode 56.1. That was why did that one get you emotional, Patrick? I don't know. Jim, anything about the performances as an ensemble, without the individual?
I thought it was really interesting in a movie about death, how many roles went to comedians like Matt Walsh, like Kerry Kenny, and specifically Darcy Carden in that UCB scene. When we talk about full performances and what a wonderful actress she is, the look away that she has, the moment of awareness, it pulls you into her. There's so much you can say about so many of the performances in this movie where you know their emotional state, you know their arc, you know how they're trying to process this. And it's great, and it's full, and it's rich.
Giving the actors freedom to find those moments is an example of great direction. Restraint can be an example of great direction. That's why I'm putting it in this category. There's a number of examples that even in the shot selection, which is my segue to talk about shots, they are appropriately not flashy, but highly functional. A decent mix of close-ups and wides. He often showed restraint in the scene, I feel, avoiding going too close and letting the actors play around in a well-framed image. I really appreciated a lot of that. He may have missed the opportunity to use a little more visual iconography that might have added to the cinematicism. He did have iconography and ideas along those lines, but they were mainly audio ideas. The use of the train song, for example, was brilliant, but that's kind of audio iconography. Bringing up the birch trees is another example, but that's sort of a dialogue callback, less of the visual iconography that I'm talking about. If we had seen more birch trees without the need to call them out verbally, or if David had felt the need to cut up another picture, or if we saw a dead chicken or even a live one somewhere, that would have added a little meaning here and there. It's just the smallest of quibbles. There was opportunities there that they didn't take advantage of that would have made it, like, it was number 7 in my top 10 of 2016. It might have made it 4 or even 3. Jim, were you about to raise your hand?
Yeah. Because I do want, regarding iconography, I really liked the use of the jogging path with the bench as sort of just a shortcut to letting us know here's how she's doing, whether she's jogging, whether she's slowing up and needs a second. I think the last time she was walking was a little shorthand of this is where the progress is.
Well, it just sort of sets up a routine that they jog this path every day, and then each time they return to it months and months later, she's a little further along. I wouldn't call that iconography per se.
It was the one kind of high angle shot as well. That's the one trick that they use in this film. I can't. They didn't even have a dolly. It wasn't flashy at all. When I was first watching it, it took me a second to get into the style because it was just like so plain. But as you're watching it, it allows you to get just watching the characters and less the camera work.
How would you, but I mean, like, a lot of times there's an art in making the camera invisible. What I did notice is they didn't just plop the camera down in a random place. Everything was the composition of all the frames was very detailed, and all the shots were functional. It wasn't just like they just shot everything wide and theatrical and just let them play. There was a mix of close-ups and mediums and wides, so there was thought put into it. Yeah. And I do think it was appropriate.
It was appropriate, but it was all shoulder mounty, it was gently rocky handheld style, which is cool. It's indie. It just took me a second. It didn't take me very long, but I was like, when I first started watching, like, okay, it's an indie.
Patrick, the funny thing about you saying that to me is a lot of times people feel like overly flashy moves are distracting. I often find this more, I don't want to say conventional, but conservative maybe approach less distracting, puts emphasis on the story. So it's interesting to me that you find the very basic shot choices, functional but basic shot choices, that's what you find distracting. The reason for the choice was to be not distracting.
Understood. The camera was staying out of the way. It wasn't trying to be a character in the film. I get that. And it was doing it very well. When I'm watching indie, it's nice when they elevate the form. And this wasn't necessarily elevating it. It was living within it, which is fine, but they weren't elevating it is all I'm saying.
That's why I sort of suggested some of the iconography ideas, little things that they can use to bring up the visual language of the film. I don't disagree completely. I do like a lot of the framing and the shot choices. You've seen my film. You've both seen it. Jim is in my film, Homecoming. So he's definitely seen it. Patrick saw it. Patrick thought you weren't very good, Jim. But I mean, like, I have a very similar style, Patrick, of being a little more restrained and letting the actors work within the frame.
No, but you also were ambitious in I mean, could we not big up JB here? You had ambitious parts of your film. There wasn't any ambitious parts of this film.
One thing that I did have a lot of, or tried to do a lot of, is iconography. Not to make myself this much better director than Chris Kelly, because obviously he had this accomplishment of a film. It's interesting because that is one of the ways I tried to be more visual, and that is the one thing that I think this film could have used. Let's talk about performances on the individual. As I said, I named Jesse Plemons Best Actor of 2016, so obviously he was should have been nominated Best Actor on that year's Oscar preview. So let's go back to that same night, February 23rd, 2017, when we started naming our should have been nominated Best Actors. Take a look.
I'm hard pressed to figure out a standout Best Actor role this year for me.
Well, I've got one for you.
Okay.
It's a movie that unfortunately you did not see, but maybe you will, even though it's very uplifting, so very much not your kind of movie.
Yeah. Get it over.
But anyway, we're back to other people. And the gentleman on the left there, you might recognize from Friday Night Lights if you watched that show. His name is Jesse Plemons, and he's been a character actor bouncing around Hollywood from a very young age. It doesn't require the histrionics of a Casey Affleck and Denzel Washington in their respective movies. It's still a fully realized three-dimensional portrait of a modern young gay man in a family crisis. And what's particularly amazing to me about Plemons is if you think about Plemons in Friday Night Lights versus him in a Battleship or Black Mass, he's so completely different. His whole body and mannerism shift in each of these characters. I think the ceiling's very high for this young talent, and I think his performance is outstanding, worthy of recognition, and definitely was my favorite performance for leading male this year. I like the subtlety of it. I like how natural he feels.
I really like this guy's performance in Black Mass. I haven't seen other people, obviously.
I mean, he's so different. It's a man. And David Joe, remind me, you did not see other people either, right? You didn't?
No, I need to.
A couple of things I want to highlight from that clip. It is enormously difficult to play just a regular person. I find that larger-than-life characters are often easier because you're either creating them from nothing or they offer a certain amount of histrionics or bigness. But real people require a certain amount of nuance or smallness that is super challenging. But Jesse Plemons is so natural in this role that you forget he's acting, which is kind of the point. And the other thing is how different he is as an actor from character to character. The performance becomes all the more impressive if you audit it against his other work in Friday Night Lights, Black Mass, Black Mirror, Game Night, or even this past year's Jungle Cruise. And he makes these transformations without the aid of any external factors. It's not about makeup or costumes. He's using his acting ability, full body acting, from his eyes and face to his waist and legs to mold himself into this person. Patrick and I are on the opposite side of the camera, behind the camera. So many actors that we come across don't think about how their character walks, moves, or gestures. But it's such a subtle and important aspect of creating a character. Jesse Plemons makes it look so easy, and that's why I think it's the best performance for a male lead in 2016. Jim, what do you think about what I said in the clip or what I said just now?
You hit on exactly the word, which is smallness. For a lead character, he manages to both hold the scene and still push himself to be smaller than the other actors around him. It's not easy to be awkward and hold attention, and he manages to do that so effortlessly. His career arc amazes me, the variety of roles he's played. It's definitely one of my favorite performances. It's just a really great character study.
Patrick, Jesse Plemons.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I will comment a little bit on what you said, as that he changed, he's morphed into a different figure as his other characters. His other characters, as I see them, are awkward, antisocial outsiders that are seeking adoration from another person, or just seeking like love. That's all he ever does in every role that I've seen him in. So, and he does it really well. So I don't know how much of a stretch this is for him, but he does this small character that you don't know when he's going to explode or what he's going to do. But he does that very, very well. So I really did like him, but I don't think it is that much of a stretch.
Well, I'm going to throw out some other titles because I don't think that's true of Black Mass. I don't think it's true of The Post. I don't think it's true of American Made. I don't think it's true of Hostiles.
No, you can keep calling out titles, but the ones that I've seen him, I'm gonna be honest with you. You can keep calling them out because I haven't seen his whole thing, but I've seen the one in Black Mirror. I saw him in Boogie Nights.
He's not in Boogie Nights.
What's that guy?
That's the late Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Even in that the new movie where he was the FBI guy,
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Judas and the Black Messiah. He still plays that kind of creepy guy who's preying on people a little bit, but that's just like a perversion of just
persona.
Not really his persona. He kind of like hides in plain sight, especially in that movie Judas. He's just like hiding in the crowd and no one notices him, but you're kind of like just with him. He plays these small, biggish characters very well. This kind of awkward, weird characters. And I feel like this is one of those characters.
So it sounds like you think it's a good performance, but you disagree with how different I felt it was.
Right.
Even when he's awkward, he's still a force.
I think we all made our points about Jesse Plemons. Just to move on here. So my question to you guys is, and Jim, you might be better at this than Patrick. How do you feel about this comment that I called it the best performance of 2016? Is that crazy talk? And Jim, you were on the show where we talked about my best female leading performance of 2016 was Rebecca Hall and Christine. You like the performance. Do you feel like it was of that ilk, of that like top of the year ilk, or could it have been? I know you don't know all the performances like I do, but is it that good?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's hard to put him against flashier performances. I think it is a subtle and nuanced character study that is a really strong performance. It would be very easily shadowed by like flashier, more emotional things.
That's exactly why I feel like it should be acknowledged.
And I agree with you on that. I think that it is technically and more difficult to do exactly that role. So yeah, I think it should be acknowledged as one of the best performances. Is it the best? I don't know, man.
I already called out some other ones. The two big nominees were Denzel Washington versus Casey Affleck, if you remember that.
I think Plemons can hang in that same group.
Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick got a little hot. He also wanted to show off his physique there a little bit. So he started this robe for us. If you hang on another 10 minutes for us, that shirt might come off. This is going to be a really exciting show here. I'm going to move on to the next performance. Molly Shannon won the Indie Spirit Award as Best Supporting Actress for her role in this film. Though she didn't make my top 5 supporting actresses that year, I did vote for her in that category back then. It's some great work and possibly the best of her career. Like the rest of the cast, she feels so thoroughly created, it's a wonder to behold. To me, it's not the way she recreated the illness itself. It's the moments around the illness that I find the most beautiful. As she too searches for ways to understand the what and the why of what's happening to her and how to imagine a world that she's not a part of. It's like a walking evocation of the stages of Kubler-Ross without ever feeling didactic. But even the illness scenes in their latter stages are highly believable and never milked, culminating in her final messages to her son in one of the best scenes in the film. Patrick, Molly Shannon.
I love the last 3/4 of the film. The first 1/4, I just wasn't used to the, oh shoot, she's dying, because I know she's hilarious. So I want to laugh with her and I want to be happy with her. There was parts of it that I couldn't be. So it was awkward seeing her. But I did think that as the movie went on and as she got sicker, it became very believable. When she lost her voice, you started to really feel for her. She rose to that occasion. I started to forget that she was just this zany comedian that I've always thought of. She did a really good job.
Patrick has a hard time letting go of what he knows of actors. We had the same problem with North by Northwest. He decided Hitchcock was a certain thing, and when North by Northwest was really funny, he was like, why are they why are they doing this? Why isn't it action? Why isn't it suspense? Boxes.
Well, that's why I like doing stuff with you, JB, because I wouldn't have come to this movie, and if I saw her picture on the thing, especially with Jesse Plemons, I'd be like, what? This is a comedy. It's going to be weird. And I turn this thing on. I'd be like, what the hell is this? And if I wasn't watching it for you, I might have turned it off when I might not come back to it.
I appreciate that. But I will say about a lot of SNL actors, including Molly Shannon, were trained outside of that. They weren't necessarily trained for comedy. They were trained as actors and found their way to success through SNL, and so honed that comedy craft. But Molly Shannon, among many other actors, I think Kate McKinnon is another one, that weren't solely focused on comedy. They were focused on acting and happened to find success in comedy. Jim, Molly Shannon.
Yeah, I think she was great. I agree. I think this was the best performance of her career.
Is there any other performance in the film? Jim already talked about Darcy Carden and basically a cameo. She has 2 scenes.
Yeah.
Are there other actors that you guys wanted to bring up before we moved on to screenplay? Because everyone's good to my mind. I don't think there's a single one that bumps for anybody. Is there anybody that you guys wanted to talk about?
I mean, Josie was fucking hilarious. I wasn't expecting that character at all. This movie had characters you just didn't expect, but I definitely wasn't expecting a little kid to have like a whole, maybe even 15-minute feature. He had 2 huge scenes.
Probably 4 minutes. Patrick said time is very distorted.
He probably had more lines than grandparents. I thought he was great. Or she was great, excuse me.
Jim, anybody outside of Darcy Carden?
I agree with you. I don't think there were any bad performances. Pretty much everyone we covered were the highlight performances.
It's the smallest role, but I do want to call out how impressed I am with the evolution of Maude Apatow. Not only in this film, but also even more recently, last year's movie with Pete Davidson, The King of Staten Island. It's a terrible movie. She was very, very good in it. I've had some issues with Judd Apatow films over the last few years, but Maude has really impressed me as she comes along as a young actress. Patrick, so you know, because you're looking at me quizzically, Maude Apatow played the younger of the 2 sisters.
I thought the sisters did really good in just the looks and just how sisters would treat you, judging you without saying very much.
All very natural. That's why I start with direction. All those little things, recreating that level of honesty and realism, that's great direction to me. That segues me to screenplay, which I actually don't have a lot about. I think it's a great screenplay. I actually named it as the best screenplay of 2016. But since the writer and the director are the same person, like I've said, the things that make it great are things that I've called out. I will right now call out the dialogue here, which is not overly clever, because sometimes the overly clever dialogue bumps for me. This manages to be funny or meaningful in a very organic way. A special call out to the birch tree monologue midway through the film. I think that's an example of exquisite writing. Overall, the kind of verisimilitude aimed for and achieved by the script and film is in line with my own personal aesthetic, as we've talked about. It's a wonder to behold to me, especially on a smaller scale. And yes, guys, I did say verisimilitude, so Patrick and I will drink. Anything, Jim, on screenplay?
I will say right ahead, the problem that I have with the film is completely unfixable. But what I did like is that I feel that Chris Kelly was very aware. It is a very narrow, personal viewpoint. We're seeing this through one person's experience.
On this show, Jim, we call it limited perspective versus general perspective.
Yes, it is. Well, it is a very limited perspective.
That's not a bad thing. There's lots of great films. A lot of film noirs are limited perspective.
I found myself going, boy, I really wish that I had more of a perspective on the sisters. And it was literally the next scene, I think, where he goes to see them and Maude Apatow's line is like you would know, like you would know how I feel, highlighting the fact that we aren't seeing their perspective. I don't know how you could fix that.
I think it's
from any
intentional,
one of
Jim.
these.
So I'm going to
Well,
ask
yeah,
you.
I agree.
But I'm going to ask you to put a pin in that because I think it's more than just a choice. Can we put a pin in it?
We can absolutely put a pin in it.
Because I've got a T word on it. So just hold that thought. Patrick, anything on what I said about the screenplay?
I think you could have cut out maybe 40% of the family, the extended family. I thought the party had too many characters at the wedding, rehashing characters that you might have remembered from the beginning of the film. I think you could have cut out a bunch of those characters. But screenplay was great. Anything that gets me to cry is worth it.
Tough nut. Even though he does call his mother after every show, it sounds like. So maybe he's not as tough as he thought. We did a film together recently, and after we wrapped that, he cried. So maybe he's not.
My feet hurt, maybe, but I don't cry not from the performance.
I don't know why you cried. You just cried. I agree that cutting out those characters, there's an efficiency to that. I might have missed it. I might have missed some of those tertiary characters because I feel like they offered some shading, if you will, if it were a painting, texture around the edges of the overall portrait. I think you could have gained some minutes back, which are valuable, and it would have been efficient, right onto it. But I think there would have been a little less life. The overall environment might have felt less alive. It's a theory, but I see your point mathematically. I just disagree with that. It would have made it definitely better because I think if it were too mathematical, it wouldn't have had the heart or the emotional impact you've already admitted that it did have.
But I do feel like the sisters could have had a bigger role in the film, and there was opportunities at the party that were eaten up.
So it wasn't about making it shorter. It was about shifting the focus of some of those.
Shifting the focus, yeah, and go deeper into the other characters. But I definitely felt like I lived with the family, but I don't feel like I lived with the sisters. I felt like I lived with the dad a little bit. I definitely lived with the mom and the son. Obviously, they're the main characters. They were there. The dad was in the house.
Definitely a tough call. It was just enough for me, but I can see that. I can, I don't know that I would have made that change. I can definitely see editing room arguments where they talked about, I need to cut this scene with the sisters so I can get I can definitely see those things happening. It felt okay. I didn't miss enough of the sisters. I got just enough for the theme to land to me that I'll talk about.
I think there was a point to that of how overwhelming and weird that party was. I'm okay with all of the characters because I don't know if you're supposed to know who's important and who's not yet.
I agree with you, but I think Patrick's point was, why did we need to come back to them? He felt like overall there was an imbalance between specifically the sisters and the extended family.
I would have liked to have seen the sisters a little bit more. Again, I've been told I'm not allowed to talk about that yet.
The perspective is something I wanted to come back to. That's all.
I see Patrick's point. I don't think you can do that in the structure that he's built without opening up the perspective.
I don't think that's what Patrick's suggesting. I think Patrick's suggesting just more scenes between David and the sisters, maintaining the perspective, but just interacting with them more. But the fact that he doesn't interact with them as much is part of the point.
Yes, exactly.
So leads us to our segment that Jim loves called
The T Word.
It's time for the T Word, ladies and gentlemen, the segment where we talk about themes. Drunk Davey, who used to be in the show, used to hate talking about themes whenever we talk about the themes of a film or what we took from a film. So we used to have to dance around it, called the T Word. A segment was born, and here we are. And at the risk of annoying Patrick, I'm going to start with the more obvious one and not the one that Jim wants to talk about. I'm going to talk first about loss and grief. It's a common theme that comes up a lot. But I still maintain that what makes other people better is that it does so without artifice or manipulation. And obviously, Patrick and I disagree about that a little bit. I feel like the film's extreme sense of realism, true realism, not maudlin realism, makes the film more universal. The film gently takes us by the hand and invites us to join it in experiencing this loss of someone we didn't know previously. So as Joanne deteriorates, we feel it deeply too. And in doing so, it either prepares us for when we will inevitably have to go through something similar, or helps to ease any pain we hold on to from having gone through it before, knowing that a lot of other people go through it too. And trying to cope with the residual pain of his own loss, writer-director Chris Kelly winds up performing something of a public service. Through relating the experiences of this family and even the tertiary characters, the film offers all sorts of options. Not hard and fast rules, not a singular path, but options of how we might be able to deal with our own grief, past, present, or future. Whether that be laughter, siblings, family members, old photos, or even birch trees. For me, in relation to my father, it's my connection to sports, particularly football, for example. For you guys, it might be something else. There's a lot of ways our loved ones can live in our hearts, and this film subtly reminds us of that. Again, it's the one that's a little more on the nose. I'm going to start there and then dig a little deeper. I'm sorry, Patrick, it's the obvious one, but loss and grief and other people.
Yeah, that's a great theme. It makes perfect sense.
All right, Jim, I've got another one for you that's going to address what you talked about earlier, but first, loss and grief.
Yeah, I mean, to Patrick's point, it's one of the primary ones. I think they do have a lovely way of showing it.
So it sounds like you guys have nothing to add on this point.
Yeah, no, nothing to add on that point.
Here's the thing that Jim was talking about earlier when he was talking about not seeing the sisters enough. And I specifically called this theme limited perspective, which I think is important here because I think the title actually calls it out. There's a character that actually says it at one point. Sometimes it's hard for us to consider how others are feeling. The line in the movie from this character says, you're other people to other people. It's not a riddle. It's a sobering reminder. Particularly in times of crisis or trauma, we get wrapped up in our own pain, which is okay to some degree, of course. Our own pain is all that we can know for sure. But the film reminds me anyway, not necessarily to ignore my own feelings, but to at least factor in someone else's point of view, which is a lot harder than it sounds, especially in these extreme situations. Sometimes it's about taking a moment to even ask someone how they're feeling, or the film suggests sometimes it's just as simple about being present and available for others. And in this case, that's the sisters. But it applies even in some regular day situations as well. Sometimes it does not only others some good to step outside of our own heads, but it's probably healthier for us as well. It's about taking that breath and walking a mile in that other person's shoes, trying and imagining what they're experiencing and how it might impact how we think and feel about certain things. And if we're able to do that step by step, we can possibly have a more well-rounded living experience. So Jim, that's what I had to say about limited perspective and why I feel like it was important and part of the reason why we didn't have as much as the sisters as you wanted.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think your other people to other people is basically the thesis of the film. We happen to see the perspective of this one person, but in truth, we're all of the time wrapped up in our own personal stuff and not really giving thought to the person we pass on the street and what their troubles are and what's going on in their life.
People we pass on the street might be a little much, but I mean, it's people that we're encountering specifically. When we're dealing with people, we're not acknowledging their situation. The sister makes the point that he's only wrapped up in his sadness. You know what I mean? I think it's a big realization for him when he realizes that other people are going through this too, as I use the title in my argument.
We'll go back to the Darcy Carden scene. You have the friend who comes up to the table, who's obviously oblivious to what's going on.
And that's okay. Why should she know something that she doesn't know?
Exactly. She's wrapped up in her stuff. And Darcy Carden, who has this moment, the 2 points of view of the movie, people who don't consider the other viewpoint, when that viewpoint is given to you and you have to accept it, and with all of the weight and responsibility that comes with that, and how that can intersect in a moment.
The way Darcy Carden played it, and I think it's beautiful. I actually interpreted that the whole situation triggered something from her own past. Patrick, anything on this limited perspective idea?
Not really. I think you guys basically covered it. The line that got me is when the sister said that other people are suffering too. And sometimes you get so wrapped up in your own grief. Like he had so many issues with his dad and with his career that he forgot that everyone else was going through this loss as well in their own different way.
Just to make the point, that is an extremely natural thing to do. And it is also very important not to ignore your own feelings and not to simply focus on others. That is equally unhealthy. There's a balance, just like the balance of comedy and drama in the film. It's just about anything in life. Do you guys have themes of your own that you wanted to talk about? Anything I didn't bring up? Jim, you were talking about absurdity at one point.
Yeah. The other theme that I had was just the absurdity of the process of death. Culturally, we are divorced from it. We don't like to talk about it. And all of a sudden it is thrown into your face where you're having to make decisions of like, how do you want your remains to be handled? I think a lot of the humor from that is there's just nothing left to do but deal with it in that way. That humor is like one of the great salves that we have in order to deal with sort of like this unknowable future. It's just to be able to laugh at it and just be like, this is just something that we have to go through.
I mean, I think that's actually a subset of my initial loss and grief theme. I thought maybe you would bring it up there. I do think that the laughter part of it is one of the options that Chris Kelly suggests in dealing with the loss and the grief. Patrick, what about you? Any other themes that you took from the film?
The lead character was just never comfortable. I don't think he was comfortable in his own skin before the loss. He wasn't comfortable within his own family. It took him spilling out his emotion. It took this death for him to finally have the confidence to talk to his dad.
I also think it took the death for the father to give him the platform, because I think the father would avoid the conversation.
The mom covered for both of them. The mom was a wall in between that, and they couldn't hide from that anymore.
I'm not sure how you would make that into a theme, but he gained his power within the family, and the father gained balance within the family.
It's part of moving forward. It's part of this idea of coping, the loss and grief thing. Like, I think it falls under that category as well. It is about the next step forward. Like, it's about this realization that that wall that Jim talked about is gone. What do we do? Do we just ignore each other moving forward? Or do we try to be a father and son? And do we accept each other for who we are? Or, because, you know, to Jim's point, with her there, he didn't need to accept his lifestyle. He can love him without accepting his lifestyle because the mother was there to take care of that. It is the communication that loss and grief forces. And so maybe if I were to spin this in a theme, I guess family, we can say that about a lot of films, but specifically this here, the family does grow through this painful process, grow as a unit.
Definitely.
All right, guys, it's time for closing thoughts.
Call your mother. That's how I'm feeling.
Call your mother, not me. Jim?
Here's my closing thought is there are movies that are meant to be watched in a theater. I felt really good watching this on my TV at home. This was such a personal movie, and I felt such a one-to-one connection to it. I almost didn't want that theater experience.
I find that blasphemous.
I know.
I curse you for even saying I did. When I first saw it, I did see it in the theater as part of the Indie Spirit Award screenings. It's a smaller theater at that. I think, Jim, you've been to some of those screenings with me when it was in New York back in the day. So it's a smaller theater and maybe a more intimate experience, but it didn't have any impact. I enjoyed it more probably, like, because I enjoyed the communal theatrical experience and the big screen. I think sometimes intimacy is even heavier on the big screen. So I hear you, but I humbly disagree.
And I didn't see it in the theater, so
nothing to compare it to. But it sounds like you guys are at least happy. Even Patrick, you know, like you hadn't heard of it, but you're glad you at least watched it now, and yeah, you have heard it and can recommend it to friends.
Yes, I can. My mom's gonna watch it. I don't know how. She is
good enough.
Yeah.
Jim, is Vic gonna watch it?
She would watch this movie.
Okay, tell the kids. I want your kids to watch it.
No, do not have the kids watch this
movie. They're 18 and
college
19.
girls. They're college girls.
Oh, okay. They're not like 10. They're not like okay.
No, there's an 8-year-old in the other room. He's a little
not
bit
him.
For it.
Yeah,
it's
the girl. On that note, guys, thank you so much. Here's our trivia for our next indie, and it'll be our final indie of our 7th season, and will bring us to Germany. And a film that also made my top 10 of 2016. It was the first film ever directed by a woman to win Best Picture at the European Film Awards. And that's your trivia for the next indie coming up in a month or so. Our next show, however, will be our classic movie discussion, one of the biggest classics of all time, the 4th Hitchcock film we've ever reviewed on the show. Maddie P, Kelly, and I will review Psycho from 1960. And that's coming up in just a few days. All right, guys, say goodbye to the audience.
Goodbye, audience.
Bye.
It's Patrick and Jim, and I'm JB. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.